One of the most important things to understand in V Rising is the servant mechanic and exactly what goes in to how servants function within the game, because they are an amazing way to do all sorts of different things, from defending your castle in PvP to gathering tons of loot for you to help you progress as fast as possible and keep your base running efficiently. And this will be your ultimate guide, understanding servants. We're going to cover everything from unlocking them to optimizing their gear to optimizing the loot, what areas are best to send them on, which ones make the best servants, how you're going to want to set up your servant army, and everything you're going to want to know to utilize servants to their maximum capabilities. Let's get into it. Okay, so you'll unlock servants decently early in the game, but it's typically a more mid to late game kind of thing. By the time you really start setting it up and getting those high percentages converted on over and getting them out to the missions that you have good enough gear to get them on to be successful. So if you're like brand new to V Rising, I wouldn't be super worried about servants right out the gate, because they are something you're going to kind of slowly grow into as your castle develops to the point where you get that max level castle heart and you've got all sorts of good servants like you can see right here in my castle on the screen. And I think a good time in general to maybe start focusing on your servant legion is going to be after you defeat a couple bosses to unlock some very crucial things for this process. First is going to be Vincent, because he's going to enable the prison cell for your castle. And then up here, Leandra at level 50 is going to unlock the Dusk Caller. So once you've got the prison cell and the Dusk Caller, you've kind of got both of the things you're going to want in order to capture some prisoners and turn them into servants very efficiently when you see those high blood percentages out on the map while you're exploring. And some people don't know about this, but when you have a prisoner in their jail cell, you can actually turn them into a servant. They aren't like a prisoner permanently who can't switch, but they can only switch in one direction. You can't take a servant and turn them into a prisoner for a jail cell, but you can take a prisoner out of a jail cell and move them into a servant coffin. So what I would do in order to pull that off is just switch over to the dominate form right here, interact with the prison cell, and then click on subdue, and then I would go run over to the servant coffin, and it will then give me an option to insert the prisoner into the coffin, and then they will no longer be in the prison cell. They will switch over to being a servant permanently. But we're not going to do that right now. We're going to go ahead and just put it back in the prison cell. But another important note is you can only turn humanoids into servants. You can't do something like this bat right here that I have from Mortium. I can't turn this bat into a servant. And you also can't do things like mosquitoes. I know those are really popular right here. These mosquitoes, people summon them in the vermin nest and try to capture high blood percentages for their base. You can't turn things like the creatures and mosquitoes and bats into servants. It has to be an actual humanoid. So then once you've got some servants converted and they're roaming your castle like this, there are a few basic things I want you to understand. Number one is they will freely roam your castle. So they will open up doors and go upstairs, and they will like get in fights with things in your tombs and your vermin nest. Like if I didn't have this door locked by a servant lock, they would walk over here and start getting in fights with stuff and start dying. So you do want to kind of keep that in mind when you're building your castle. And these little purple servant locks are going to indicate doors that servants will not open. So when you're building, keep that in mind when you're over here kind of doing your gates and your doors and stuff, to place one with this purple servant lock on it if you do not want your servants going into a certain area, or if you want to keep them enclosed in a certain area. But for the sake of this kind of like ultimate general guide on servants, I'm not going to be diving into like honeycombing your base and how to utilize them in that situation. I want to make sure you understand the basics of how to utilize servants effectively first. And then maybe someday here on the channel, I'll talk about like how to perfectly set them up for PvP and defending your castle. That might be like a separate specialized video. But you can use them if you want them to like help you fight. Like let's say you're at the Stygian summoning circle and you're summoning bosses to farm in your base. You absolutely can use your servants to help you in those engagements. And if they die, it's okay. You're not going to lose them permanently. You can very reasonably revive them. It's not super expensive or anything. It's like a little bit of blood and a little bit of time, and then they're back and ready to go. Which, speaking of gearing your servants, if you want them to help you fight and all of that, you're going to need gear on them, because the better their gear, the better their hunt proficiency is going to be, and the higher level areas they're going to be able to access on the map in general when they're gathering loot for you. Now, this is a mistake that I made when I was new. I thought the actual equipment on the servant would matter, but it does not. So I remember when I was new, I thought like, okay, I've got an archer girl as a servant. I should probably give her a bow as a weapon because that's probably going to matter. But it absolutely does not. You just want to give them the best gear you possibly can, because the only thing you have to worry about is up on the top left, that gear level score. That is the only thing relevant for the servants in terms of the gear they're wearing. It doesn't matter if you give a mage a sword or a rogue an axe. None of that matters. Just get the best gear level possible. And one pro tip you're definitely going to want to know about is when you're putting gear on your servants, the way that can be most optimal is anytime you've got a set of gear that is losing durability, instead of spending resources to repair the gear that you're wearing, take that gear and put it on a servant and then craft yourself a new set. That's going to be a lot more efficient use of your resources. So remember, when your gear gets damaged, take it off yourself, place it on a servant, and then craft yourself a new set of gear to wear. And now let's talk about the blood percentage of the original capture that you had and how that's going to transition into expertise and the quality of the servant they turn into, because there is a correlation between the blood quality and then what they turn into as far as a servant. But there is some randomness. Like a 100% blood quality servant is not always going to end up being a better servant than a 92% blood, because of there being a little bit of RNG. As you can see with the chart that I've got up here on the screen, a 100% blood quality servant is still going to roll a little bit of a range, because when they complete the process of turning into a servant, I think it's like 20 minutes on default settings. When you put them in the coffin, it's going to have like a 20-minute countdown, and then you're going to be able to raise them up as a servant. And when you do that for the first time, they're going to roll a percentage expertise. As you can see right there, it says gear level 91, expertise 39. So what happened is I put a 100% servant into the coffin. That means my expertise was going to roll somewhere between 37 and 44. And for this servant in particular, it rolled a 39 out of that range. And then for me personally, you can do whatever you want, obviously, but for me, I named him 39 Cursed, because that tells me the percentage that he rolled for expertise in the area that I'm going to be wanting to send him, which is the Cursed Forest. And the reason this is really important to understand is because I've seen people make the mistake of being like, I'm not doing any servant unless it's 100%. I'm not wasting my time. And you're missing out on a lot of free loot if you wait a really long time to get your servants rolling and get those resources coming in. So I would say in general, basically anything that you can at least get like a 30% expertise. So if you look on the chart, that starts at 86%. So I think a good barometer of when you should think about turning something into a servant, I would say at that 86% minimum, because then you're going to at least be getting 30%. It's not like it's permanent and you can never replace them with a better servant, but I would rather have you get started on loot coming in as soon as possible and then start the process of min-maxing it once you're ready. And as you can see with me kind of walking around, I've got a little bit of a range here on the percentages: 41, 37, 37, 38, 43, 39. So you're going to have a little bit of a range. And usually like the end game goal that people strive for is to have all of your servants at 40% expertise. And in order to unlock that 40% expertise, they would need to be at least 93% blood quality. But the higher the percentage of blood quality, the more likely you are to get up there around that 40 or above in terms of expertise. Then another thing to understand is every blood type will have a certain perk that represents that blood type. So workers are going to be humble appearance, scholars are going to be sacred resistance, brute is going to be tenacious strength, rogue is tracking expertise, and then both warrior and Draculan are going to be military tactics. So if you're trying to be able to send servants out as soon as possible during the progression phase of the game where you don't have perfect gear on your servants yet, those perks are going to be important based on the blood type, because by sending a servant with that perk to a certain area, they will lower the difficulty and make it a lot higher likelihood for you to go in there and get some loot via a successful hunt. And then servants also have area specific perks. So if you capture a servant whose default area is like the Farbane Woods, then that servant is going to get bonus loot when you send them on a hunt in Fairbane Woods. And it is actually pretty important to focus on min-maxing that because you get a 20% bonus. It's not like it's 2% or something. It's a 20% bonus by matching up the homeland they're from with the servant perk in terms of the hunt you're going to send them on. And something really important to understand about these perks that I've seen a lot of people mess up, and especially new players who haven't been able to play around with this mechanic a lot, is when you are on your throne and you're sending out servant missions and you're trying to kind of match up these different perks that your servants have. A lot of people think when you're sending to an area that has an option to send 2 different servants, a lot of people think you need to match up these perks for both servants, but that is absolutely not true. These perks are either going to be on or off. There is no 1 or 2. It's either 0 or 1. So once you send a Gloomrot Hunter here to the Transcendum power plant, I don't need my second servant to also be a Gloomrot Hunter. I've already enabled that bonus, and I only need to enable that bonus 1 time. So what I would do when assigning a servant is I would go ahead and pick a Gloomrot first, and now you see I've circled it. So before I have a Gloomrot in there, the Gloomrot bonus is not circled. See, if I remove that, now it's not circled. But if I put in a Gloomrot, watch, that Gloomrot icon is going to get circled. We go boom, and then boom. It's got the green circle around it. That means you've already enabled it. So now I've got a lot more freedom on the second servant that I want to add here. It does not have to be a Gloomrot to enjoy the bonus that we've already unlocked. And the same is also true for this Sacred Resistance. Once you circle these bonuses, they are active, and you don't need to also circle them with the second servant. And then there's another thing on this screen that is very important to understand, and that is when you can send 2 servants, I think you should try to do that because the game doesn't really do a good job of telling you this, but the second servant actually gets an increase to the efficiency of the hunt. It's going to add more loot than just sending the 1 servant. Like, they're both not equal. The first servant is going to give you some loot, but the second one is going to give you even more. So when you can send 2, I would try to do so, and I can show you this in action. You can see right here, this hunt to the power plant is going to yield a possibility of up to 18 batteries. So you would think if I add another servant, well, now the maximum should be 36, because if this one matches perfectly and it's 15 to 18, when I add another one, it should be 30 to 36, right? Because you would just simply take these times 2 and then you would have your numbers, but that's actually not true. Look, I'll even add a servant that doesn't have any bonuses, and watch, that 18 batteries goes all the way up to 43. So my second servant was worth 25 and my first servant was worth 18, even though that first servant was perfect for the area. So what this means is when you are gonna be sending out a hunt to a certain area, I would either send 0 or 2. I wouldn't send 1 because you're getting a lot more efficiency on that second servant. And I've seen people do stuff like, okay, I'm going to go to the power plant, I'm going to send 1 servant, then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to send 1 servant, and they just kind of like send 1 servant to a bunch of different areas. Well, long term, you're actually missing out on a lot of resources as opposed to just being a little bit more specialized, like go 2 here, 2 here, 2 there, instead of going like 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, because then you're never getting the bonus that the second servant being added gives you in terms of increased hunt efficiency. Then I also want to dive into what I think are the most important resources and some of the areas to prioritize in different kind of stages of the game. But I do want you to know a couple little caveats that are handy to know when you're building your servant army. And that is probably the 2 hardest areas for you to successfully bring servants in is probably going to be the Cursed Forest and then the Ruins of Mortium. And the reason being is you're going to have less options in terms of servants you can capture to enable the bonuses in that area. So for the Ruins of Mortium, where you want to send for like Stygian shards and all of that, you can only use the humanoids in that area. You can't use like the little demons and the bats. You have to actually grab a humanoid, which is why you'll see that my Mortium servant over here, this Night Maiden, is a humanoid. So a Night Maiden will work, and I believe there's other ones like a Vampire Cultist, a Dark Temptress, and there's a couple different ones that work, but it is going to be a little bit more difficult in Mortium because not all of them will be able to transition into servants. Then for the Cursed Forest, there is only 1 specific servant that will work for unlocking the bonus in Cursed Forest, and that is going to be the werewolves in Grace Fall Village. Now, I have a dedicated video here on the channel talking about how important it is to go to Gracefall Village, and that was part of the reason, is that the werewolves can double dip as both creature and worker blood, but they can also unlock these server bonuses for the Cursed Forest, which is actually pretty important because there is some really good areas in the Cursed Forest where you're going to want to send servants. So then, with all of that being said, I'll pop up on the screen some of the servants that I like to go for in terms of my most general setup. If I was going to recommend the servants to try to go for, what you're seeing here on screen is what I would try to recommend to most players. And anything that I pop on the screen like this, you can grab from the Discord. I've got a resources section where you can just grab these whenever you would like. So that's going to be linked down below for you. And then lastly, let's head over to the throne and let's talk about some of the thought processes when we're sending servants out to gather loot. Okay, first of all, number one, everybody's playthrough is different. Everybody's situation is different. Some of you are on PvP servers and certain resources are really tough to get, or you're really struggling with a certain resource. So what you need to be prioritizing is whatever you are low on. You shouldn't be taking some YouTuber's word for what you should be doing every single time sending your servants out. It's going to change a little bit depending on your situation. But with that being said, just in general, I'll kind of talk about my thought process, what I'm going through here most times. Okay, so silk ends up being a big bottleneck a lot of times, and it's really annoying to farm. So I personally like to send to get the silk and just get a large stock of that, because when you're farming silk, you got to go up here to the spider cave and run through there and break all the cocoons, and you're having to deal with like putting your cape on because you're going to be up in the Cursed Forest, so you got to keep that on, or you're going to go blind vision wise. It's just kind of annoying to go up there and farm silk. So I really like to utilize my servants to get a good stock of silk coming in. And there's two different areas you can go. You can go to the spider cave, or you can go over here to the Cursed Swamp, and both of them will yield some silk. The spider cave is going to be a little bit more, but you can also get some hide and some silk over here in the Cursed Swamp. Then also, these cursed villages can be decent. It's not super hard to farm the ghost crystal, but it is kind of annoying because every time you're sitting there chopping the ghost crystal, those banshees are going to pop out and like stun you and stuff, and you got to bring your cape, like I said, with the silk, so it can be kind of annoying. So it is nice to hunt these every now and then as well. Also, down in Mordium, you kind of always want a good stock of greater Stygian shards, and the Bleeding Heart and the schematic are also very valuable as well. So I like to send to Dracula's Castle Garden. Basically always my Mordium hunter is just going to be permanently going there because I want a good influx of these coming in constantly. So my Night Maiden girl is just kind of on permanent Dracula Castle Garden duty, going to be going there over and over. You can use those Stygian shards to buy more legendary weapons and all that good stuff. And then you wouldn't think it, but quartz and glass is actually very important because especially in the new 1.1 patch where you can mix blood, every single time you mix blood, you're losing a bottle permanently. And I remember when I was playing in a squad on a PvP server last time, some of the resources that we were missing the most was like fish bones and glass. You want a lot of glass for when you're doing things like farming your vermin nest with the canisters that you have to make, and you want a lot of glass for all the blood and the mixed blood you're going to be drinking and all the potions and everything. And there really isn't a great way to mass quartz. Like you can really only get it from this one location. So I do like to send 2 servants here until I've got thousands of quartz and hundreds of glass at least, because you don't really ever want to be out of it. So those are some of my staples that I like to focus on. And then other than that, it's just going to be whatever you need. You're just going to kind of click around the map and kind of go over the different areas. Some of you are really going to want to bring in a ton of batteries really often. So you're going to want to go over and do that. Or you're going to be at a stage in the game where you need lots of emery and ember glass. So you'd want to be sending 2 servants over there. So it just kind of depends after that what you're prioritizing and sending those servants out efficiently to keep your base functioning. So yeah, I hope this helped you understand servants a little bit better. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know down in the comment section or hop on into the Discord and tag me and I will be happy to help out. So remember to subscribe on your way out so you don't miss any of the guides and tips and tricks and builds and type of stuff we're going to be doing here on the channel. And thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.